There is much more to consider in the current Iranian nuclear negotiations than just what type of weapon the mullahs might create and how long it would take them to break any treaty. When one considers that region of the planet, one must also think about a new scenario for what was once called MAD, and how a certain POTUS candidate might function as the man with his finger on the button. Our guest is the man who was principal author for the shock and awe doctrine seen in the Middle East, now senior advisor at the Brent Scowcroft Center on International Security. Welcome back, Harlan Ullman. Harlan, always a pleasure to get a chance to talk to you, and I think we have to start right away with Iran, because earlier today the Iranian president on Twitter jumped the gun, sent out, "Iran deal is the victory of diplomacy and mutual respect over the outdated paradigm of exclusion and coercion, and this is a good beginning," and then he deleted it moments later. Again, I think it just speaks to a little bit about the Iranians and how they really are waiting to celebrate this. But we shouldn't be celebrating with them, should we, Harlan?
I don't think celebrate is the right word. I think if we get a good agreement, and I gather one will be reached tomorrow or not, it's in our mutual interest. And I think we have to look at this in a very, very sober, clear-eyed way. If this can be made to work, obviously it's going to open things. My guess is that the Iranian president is representing the feelings of many Iranians who want to be welcomed back into the international community. The embargo is clearly hurting them, and I think he probably speaks for a majority of the population. But even though we may be euphoric if agreement can be reached, I think we've got to play our cards much more closely to the chest. And as I said, we have to be sober, and we've got to be objective, and I think we've got to be low-key. Yes, this is a positive step, but euphoria and public displays of that at this stage, I think, would work against us, the West.
Harlan, I hate to be this dark when it comes down to something like this, and it is such an important issue, but in your opinion, your guess, how long do you think it'll be once an agreement is signed with Iran before we come back around and they've already broken something in the treaty? A month? 6 months?
Well, I don't. When you say something, I think there are going to be parts of the treaty, particularly shipping conventional weapons to Iran, that will remain controversial. If you ask me, is Iran going to do anything to develop a nuclear weapon, I would say the chances are very unlikely that will happen. I think Iran has concluded that they now have a nuclear infrastructure sufficient that if some stage in the future they want to break out of the non-proliferation treaty, if they want to rebuke the Grand Ayatollah's promise that Iran would never build weapons of mass destruction, they have the capacity to do that. But at this stage, I think they want a deal. They want the embargo lifted, and they want to join the international community.
I mentioned MAD. When I was a kid, I mean, I was just at the latter stages of it. I certainly was in the heat of the moment when it was MAD. Mutually assured destruction. A lot of it goes back to the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s and a lot more of the hysteria and the frightening times there for the world. But you now have a new MAD called Mutual Assured Disruption. How does that work, and how can we stop it from happening?
The original MAD, which was a bad term, meant that both the West and the Soviet Union would destroy each other in thermonuclear war. And obviously that was insane, as was the notion of MAD. But I think in today's context, mutual assured disruption is what we face. We see it in the world of computers. You saw that United Airlines went out of action last week. The New York Stock Exchange dropped out. The real problem with terror, as far as the United States is concerned, is that how it is disrupting us. Go to an airport and just take a look, or go through security, and you appreciate that, what it's doing to our civil liberties. And I think when you have an interconnected, globalized world as we do, a disruption in one part of the world affects the other. For example, in China, the stock market crash could really put a dent in the Chinese economy. If that happens, its demand-driven basis for imports means that the rest of the world will stop importing as much as we are importing to China. That will disrupt our economy. You take a look at hackers, basically they're disrupting our way of life. And so instead of mutual assured destruction, because nobody wants to kill each other in thermonuclear war anymore, and there really is no Cold War situation to do that, what we face, because of the growing fragility and vulnerability of society made possible by technology and this globalization, is disruption in small ways and large ways. And I think that's something that governments have to deal with. And in this country, we need to start immediately by dealing with it through repairing our national infrastructure, not the least of which is our electrical grid, which remains terribly vulnerable to acts of man and, of course, to acts of nature.
Harlan, I got about 30 seconds left. In your opinion, do you think that politicians, any politician these days, is smart enough to understand that difference between the MAD of then and the MAD of now?
Absolutely. But the question is acting. We have a broken system of government. There are a lot of things that we need to do. The question is, can we make government work to do them? And understanding that the world now is in a function of disruption, that's something we need to deal with. I hope a politician or politicians will show the leadership and courage to get this through.
I think you just hit the second word there is probably courage, because that's what it will take, and somebody has got to man up or woman up sooner or later and have a lot of it and get it done. Harlan, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Again, see you later.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Coming up next, what exactly does America apparently want and need at this stage of the presidential race? Think about that for a moment. Not only want, but need, and seems to just can't get enough of it. We'll deal with that, telling it like it is, next, right here on the fastest 60 Minutes in News.